ESPN's Mike Clay talking trash about our secondary. He says Giants. He said he believes the Giants have the worst secondary in the NFL. My first question in this is, who is Mike Clay? Like, I don't know. I don't have cable. I looked him up. It looked like he was like a fantasy guy. You know him, Rob? You know this guy?
I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Apparently he contributes to them year round, talking NFL, fantasy football, gambling, and NASCAR. There's NASCAR in the mix. What the hell? Why not?
Because that's such a similar sport.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, I mean, I don't see the hate here. And I've heard people talk trash about our secondary before. I mean, Giants gave up 4,157 yards last year. That's 16th most in the NFL. That's average. I'm not saying they were great last year. That's average.
Yeah. That's legit. They were 16 of 32.
We're barely in the top half.
Let's make that. No, I just want to say, I want to make that very clear. We're talking about who's the worst. 16th of 32.
Yeah.
It's nowhere near the worst. That's
no,
legit.
No. We gave up 21 passing yards in 23. That's tied for the 11th least in the NFL. So we're the top third there. We gave up a 63.7 completion percentage last year to quarterbacks, 12th best in the NFL. Again, above average. Got 18 interceptions last year, tied for 5th most in the NFL. So we got 16th, 11th, 12th, and 5. But we're the worst secondary in the NFL. Maybe you need to stick to NASCAR, Mike Clay. Maybe you need to stick to NASCAR.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah.
Maybe that's what
I want to point out. 16th.
Yeah. What I'm saying.
32. Because, that's our worst asset.
That's last year. I will say that. Yeah. To be clear, that's last year. So he was saying this year. But if you look at this, what we got, we lost Xavier McKinney and Adoree Jackson in the offseason, obviously. We drafted Tyler Nubin. We drafted Andru Phillips. We signed veteran Jalen Mills. I don't think there's that much worse because Adoree Jackson was poop last year. Let's be honest, guys. Like, Xavier McKinney's a big loss. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, he was trash.
He's a big loss. But Adoree Jackson was trash last year. He fell off a very, very deep cliff. He was like, and this is when I talk about players, and I've mentioned this before. We talked about it earlier. We talked about Stephon Gilmore and possibly signing him. When father time hits a player, sometimes it hits them like a rock. Father time, I think, hit Adoree Jackson last year.
From like a 30-foot ledge.
Because he completely always depended on his speed. And his speed is no longer there because he's getting a little older. He's gotten some injuries. I mean, he's still faster than most people, don't get me wrong. But it's not as elite as it was. So, not a big loss there. McKinney's a huge loss. But you got to think that getting Tyler Nubin, who was the best safety in the draft, getting Jalen Mills, who's a veteran, kind of makes up for that somewhat. Phillips now ends up there, like I said, as well. You know, we talked about it before. You know, I'm not too high on him. I don't want to, make it seem otherwise. But I wouldn't say that group is that much worse. Is it worse? Yes. Of course, if you lost Xavier McKinney, it's worse. Is it that much worse? No. And we lost Wink Martindale. We retained defensive backs coach Jerome Henderson, who anybody who listens to the show even once knows that I'm a huge fan of. We signed Shane Bowen as a new defensive coordinator. We don't know if that's an upgrade or downgrade. We don't really know Shane Bowen. Shane Bowen was living under the shadow of Mike Vrabel in Tennessee. We don't know what legit was his and what wasn't his. All I can say is Wink Martindale was not kind to secondaries. There's a reason Xavier McKinney hated him, blasted him in the media last season. Made it very public when the free agency was started that if Wink Martindale was coming back, he did not want to be a Giant this year. Let me be very clear. He didn't come back to the Giants because of money. Not because of anything else but that. He gave the Giants a chance. We talked about this before. He gave the Giants a chance to match what the Packers gave him. They didn't want to pay him. But he didn't want to play for Wink. He left players on an island all the time. He let them expose if they weren't best on one-on-one situations. Shane Bowen could very easily be an upgrade. Very easily could. For the secondary. For the
Very.
defense as a whole, time will tell. But I think he's an upgrade probably for the secondary specifically. You know, we added Brian Burns, which is going to help the pass rush, which in turn helps
The secondary.
Exactly. So is Mike Clay crazy? Yes. Absolutely. You know, Cordell Flott as a starter is unknown. Deontay Banks is the number one corner is unknown. Tyler Nubin and Andrew Phillips are his rookies. So therefore, they're unknowns. Could this team be the worst secondary in the league? Sure, possibly. But only if all of the above players gets hurt or bust, and if Shane Bowen also flops the DC.
That's all it is.
But that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying it's impossible, but to sit there and say it as a statement, you're talking out of your tuchus, to put it nicely. You're talking right out of your gluteus maximus.
I mean, it's also the time of year in ESPN where you don't have much viewership, so like, oh, who could bet on this? Who could be, bet on that? Like, who's going to be the worst? Who's going to be the best? Let's make some bold predictions. Like, let's see a team that's middle of the pack just fall to the worst. It's got to be the Giants. Ha, 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 ha.
Yeah.
That's what you got.
Yeah, well, I guess it's still part of the year if you're putting Mike Clay out there anyway. Who the hell is Mike Clay still? We'll still figure this out. We'll lynch this next time, Giants fans. Like, seriously, like, when somebody actually knows football, like Adam Schefter comes out and says it, I'll be ticked off. But, you know, like, I'm sorry, Mike Clay, it's my first time ever hearing about the guy. I always feel like I shouldn't have brought the topic up because I'm like, who?
Thanks for listening to Two Giant Goofballs, a New York Giants podcast. We appreciate your support.
Thanks so much.